Hi, my name is Levi, and this is the Crystal Portal Podcast, where we talk about crystals, moldavite, spirit guides, sacred geometry, intuition, quantum energy, and all things metaphysical. Find something special for your spiritual journey. Shop online at moldavitejewelry.com to support my work. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 7 of the podcast. So it's another late night here in the workshop, and I figure for tonight's episode, I'll be coming to you live from the Crystal Portal Workshop to show you some of the sacred geometry that's in the Crystal Portal. Before we begin, let's talk about energy, and more specifically, the energy in symbols, sacred geometry. So if you think about it, energy is everywhere. It's in everything. Cannot be created nor destroyed. It simply changes forms. So if you think about the energy, when you walk into a room, you can feel the difference. The guides have said that it's the energetics of aesthetics. So it's like if you got nice plants and decorations and whatnot, you can kind of feel the difference in the energy that is the room itself. Everything in this 3D reality materializes through the expression of patterns we know as sacred geometry. Dr. Robert Gilbert of the Vesica Institute once described sacred geometry as the divine blueprints of consciousness and energy. So if you've been wondering what this pattern here is, this is a good example of the golden ratio. The golden ratio is an irrational number equal to approximately 1.618. And essentially, what it means is there's a measurement. So if you'll notice the spheres starting at the main center sphere going out in either direction, they're progressively smaller. So the golden ratio is often seen as a symbol of perfect proportion, beauty, and balance. And it often appears in art, architecture, nature, and is associated with aesthetic harmony, mathematical structure underlying the universe. Now, yes, I've got a little script with me. Now, essentially, the golden ratio for the bead design right here, we've got the beads over here. I know this doesn't look anything like the design, but trust me, it's there. So this is one example of the golden ratio, and also the Vesica Pisces, but we'll get back to that later, the golden ratio in the Crystal Portal. Another example of the golden ratio is right here. So these are moldavite. So we've got pieces of moldavite here along with other minerals, tektites, and meteorites. And if you'll notice, the ratio in which it goes from larger to smaller follows the same pattern. So the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence seen over here, the Crystal Portal, both represent natural growth patterns and mathematical foundation of beauty and proportion. Their presence in art is believed to generate a sense of organic flow, like an aesthetic harmony, and a natural order reflecting the way energy unfolds in nature. So if you think about seashells, you know how they have that like spiral form? So you're going to have to use your imagination here. Imagine there's a point that traces all the way down and around here to the crystal sphere. So these are Herkimer diamonds, selenite, and others. So if you look at, again, you've got the Fibonacci sequence there, but then there's another one that actually winds out over here. And that's the really cool thing about the Fibonacci sequence is it's often called nature's secret code or universal rule because it's so prevalent in biological structures and natural forms. So again, you think about some really elaborate seashells, how they have those incredible spirals, flowers of course, and even like cauliflower, some vegetables, believe it or not. So this is for any of you out there that are really into drafting or design, things like that. So the Fibonacci sequence is actually a series of numbers where each number is the sum of the two preceding ones. So starting with 0 and 1, so 0 plus 1 equals 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, 3 plus 2 equals 5, and so on and so on. So essentially what you do is you have this pattern that is made up of blocks. So it creates this perfect dimensional spiral. And that's essentially what is represented here with the Herkimers. So this is a section that I refer to as the crown. This goes to the top of the crystal portal. So if you notice, there's a triangle formation, or pyramid more or less, in both this and the bead design also. So again, we've got the beads that you can't quite tell right there, but in the design you can see it. So once I have the beads set up on the crystal portal, you'll be able to tell. You can see that really cool triangular formation there. This section right here is what I refer to as the bridge. And if you look at the very center here, this is what's called the Vesica Pisces. Now, the Vesica Pisces is formed by the intersection of two circles of the same radius, where each center, the circle, lies in the circumference of the other, creating kind of like an almond shape in the center there. So if you look at that there, and also over here in the bead design itself, that is also the Vesica Pisces. Now, this shape symbolizes kind of the union of dualities, like masculine, feminine, spiritual, and physical. It's kind of seen as a portal or threshold, representing the creation of new realities and merging energies. So it's quite appropriate for the crystal portal. So kind of in like three-dimensional art, can serve as like a focal point or balance, unity, birth of new forms. So for me, it's essentially, I see it as like a crossing of a threshold. So this is actually going to be at the very center of the crystal portal. And again, same thing for the bead design. The Vesica Pisces, kind of a crossing through portal, is at the center here. So we've got the infinity symbol both on either end of the bridge and also here in the center. Now, if you'll notice, the infinity symbol is actually in two different directions. So they have slightly different meanings. I would imagine most of you are familiar with the infinity symbol, and it's also known as lemniscate. It's kind of a weird name. It represents the concept of infinity, like something without end, limit, or boundary. Limitless potential, and has kind of a cyclical nature to it. The Metatron's cube is a little bit more of a complex symbol. It's made up of 13 circles connected by straight lines, and it contains all 5 platonic solids, which also represent earth, wind, fire, water, and ether. It's considered to be the building blocks of the physical universe. Traditionally, the symbol represents creation, balance, and the interconnectedness of all things. And spiritual traditions, often seen as a blueprint of the cosmos, a symbol of divine knowledge, protection, and underlying order of reality. In sacred geometry, this is seen as a matrix through which divine consciousness manifests into physical reality. Energetically, it's considered a symbol of balance, protection, and translation of thought into form. So in artwork, such as here, is kind of aligning the underlying structure of the cosmos. I realize this is a lot of information to cover in such a short episode of the podcast here, and to be honest with you, it's fairly challenging for me because I'm so aware of the volumes of information about each and every one of these symbols, not to mention the numerology and the crystals themselves. So I was trying to come up with an analogy that could best describe telling someone about the energy of a symbol. So if you draw a symbol on a piece of paper, what does that convey? So if you think about an apple, for example, someone says the word apple, you get an image in your mind. If someone crunches into an apple, you hear it. That also translates. So if someone says there's a festival going on downtown, some kind of a fruit festival, you're walking down there and you don't know what it is, but all of a sudden you start smelling apple pie and apple cider and apple this. Your mind automatically knows and associates apple in various forms. And so it's like having a volume of information in one simple thing that's called an apple. So these geometric symbols, there's so much energy to them that our limited brains can interpret. So if you think about that for a moment, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, start trying to think a little bit deeper on what energy is conveyed in something as simple as a geometric symbol. One interesting thing about crystals is they have what's called a lattice structure. Essentially, it means the molecules line up in a very orderly fashion, sacred geometry in crystalline form. You want to learn more about the crystals, tektites, meteorites, and more in the Crystal Portal? Follow and subscribe to tune into the next episode.